All right, let's talk about dark mode. This usually refers to the technique of using a darker color palette. Nowadays, both macOS and Windows have light and dark modes, but also iOS and Android for your handheld devices. Lately, this started to become very popular on the web. You can see an increasing number of websites that offer users the option to switch between a dark and a light mode, which is a very good thing. A darker color palette is a lot easier on the eyes, especially in low light conditions. So for those of us who are night owls and are working later into the night, having a darker UI is super beneficial. Plus, if done right, I think it looks really cool. Now, if you ever wondered how to create a toggle that allows your website to switch between light and dark, then you came to the right place, because this course is all about that. But hey, if we're just meeting, my name is Adi. I'm a professional web designer and developer. And in this course, I want to show you step by step how to create a dark mode switcher using CSS and JavaScript. Now, we're going to keep things very simple. First, we're going to take a look at the project so far. So that's our starting point. Then we'll create and style the actual theme switcher. In the third lesson, we'll add the dark theme to our page. And for that, I'll show you a cool technique that involves using CSS custom properties. And finally, we'll make the theme switcher functional by writing some JavaScript code. But we're not going to stop there. We're actually going to take this one step further, and we'll use some very cool techniques for saving the user preference in the browser's local storage. And we'll also have a look at the color setting on the operating system. So we'll see whether or not the operating system is using light mode or dark mode, and we'll factor that in. So pretty exciting stuff. I think we should get to work. But speaking of work, this video is actually brought to you by Envato Elements. Here you can find tons of useful resources like fonts, icons, UI kits, WordPress themes, music, stock photos, and much more. For creatives like me, this is an awesome resource because all the assets have simple commercial licensing and you're not bound to any contract. Therefore, you can cancel whenever you want. So if you're interested, check out the link in the video description. All right, ready to get started? Let's have a look at the project so far. Before we get started, you should know that all the resources I'm using in this course are linked down below, as well as the source files. You'll find a Figma file and the actual code that I'll be starting with here in just a moment. So if you want to follow along, make sure you download those as well. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to Envato Tuts Plus for more free content, free tutorials, and courses just like this one. All right, let's have a look at our starting point. First, let's have a look at what we need to be creating. So this is the Figma file that you can also download. And here we have a very simple coming soon page that has a light mode and a dark mode. Okay, it's the exact same content, it just has a different theme. And the part that we'll be focusing on is this. This is the theme switcher, or the dark mode switch, whatever you want to call it. This will basically enable us to switch from light mode to dark mode. And in this course, you'll be able to see how we can turn this page into this page using, of course, CSS and JavaScript. Now, in terms of the files that we're working with, I have mine in a folder on my desktop called dark mode toggle. And the files themselves, you'll find some CSS, an image for the chair, a JavaScript file, and the HTML index file. So let's go ahead and open this in Visual Studio Code, which is my editor of choice. And I'm actually gonna run a live server here so you can see exactly what we're doing. So let me just bring this over like so. So this is the page that we are starting with. I went ahead and I styled it. And the only part that still has to be done is the theme switcher that goes on the top right-hand corner here. And the page itself is very simple. It's really the exact content that you saw right here in Figma. Now let's take a look at the code. In terms of CSS, I'm using modern normalize as a reset. And then the style CSS is using some custom properties here. I'll tell you more about these in a future lesson. And then I just went ahead and wrote the styling for all the other elements, and of course some media queries to make this page nice and responsive, just like so. The HTML is also very, very simple. I'm actually using inline SVGs for pretty much all the images, or actually for the logo and for these three icons at the bottom. And the rest is, you know, it's pretty self-explanatory. So this is the part that we're going to have to work on. And if you want to follow along with the course, then go ahead and download the source files. Yours will probably be called course files or something like that, but just unzip those if they're in an archive or something and open them in your code editor. And we're ready to get started. All right, so now that we know what needs to be done, let's start by creating and styling the theme switcher. Let's go ahead and jump straight in here. We need to start by replacing this text with the actual theme switcher. So we'll create a div with an ID of theme switcher, and inside, let's have a look at the Figma file. This is basically made up of 4 elements or 3 elements. We have the 2 icons, sun and moon. We have the active bubble or circle. And then, of course, this whole thing has a background. So in terms of elements, we're going to do the following. Let's bring up the UI here in Figma. I'm going to select the sun icon, right-click, copy as SVG, because I want to use inline SVGs. So I'm just going to paste that in. And the one thing that I'm going to do here is remove the fill colors from all of these paths inside the SVG, because I want to set the fill color myself at a later date. To do that in VS Code, simply select all of these, Command D or Control D if you're on Windows, to select all of the instances and just delete those. Finally here, I'm just going to add an ID of icon sun. This will make it easier for me to target this element later on. And next, let's do the same for this icon, copy as SVG. And I'm just going to paste it right here. Do a little bit of cleanup. I'm going to remove the fill color from this one. And just like above, I'm going to add an ID of icon moon. And we should be good to go for the actual HTML. Now, if we take a look, we can't actually see anything because we removed the fill colors. But we'll get these back in just a bit. Let's work on styling this. So because these 2 elements are in the header section of my page, I actually have some sections created here in CSS. So we're going to say the following: theme switcher. We're going to start by defining the background color, and let's go ahead and define some CSS custom properties or CSS variables for this task. So let's actually define them right here. I'm going to say switch BG, and then I'm quickly going to jump back to Figma. And we're getting the switch BG, which is this one. it's F5, F5, F6, right? So let's paste that in. What else do we need? We need a switch circle BG. So that's the active background for this. That's FF D371. And then we need the color for the icon, the sun icon, I should say. So here I'm going to say icon sun, paste that in, and again, icon moon, and we're going to paste that in. And actually, icon moon in my context here is the same as the muted text. So I can actually use that variable, muted text. Great. Now, the colors that I'm defining now are the default colors. So for the light mode, we'll define the ones for dark mode a little bit later. Okay, so with some of these custom properties defined, we can go in here and we can say that the background color will be switch BG. This also needs to be rounded. So I'm going to say border radius 50 pixels. And we also need to display these icons side by side with a bit of a gap between them, 24 pixels. So we'll say the following. Display, we'll use flexbox here. We'll make sure to align them vertically. Let's set a gap to 1.33 rems. That equals to about 24 pixels. And let's also set a cursor to pointer so that they will look nice when I hover on top of them. Now let's actually bring in the colors for the icons. So here we'll say icon sun, which if you remember is the ID of the SVG. Here we're going to set the fill to icon sun, to the variable that we defined. And let's do the same for icon moon, just like so. So now let's do a refresh, and there are our two buttons. Let me actually zoom in here a little bit closer so we can see what we're doing. Let's actually add a bit of padding to this section, and the padding is 4 pixels. And 4 pixels is padding 0.66 rems. That should be good enough, yes. And now the one thing we need to add is this active circle, right? That sits right behind the icon. So how we do that? Pretty simple. We use a before pseudo element. So we'll say theme switcher before. We'll do this content none. Position absolute. Let's actually set a position relative on the parent element. Okay, let's set a width. Now the width, according to my calculations, will be 2.22 rems. The height will also be 2.22 rems. And let's set a background color, not background color. So background color, we'll set a variable to switch circle BG. Perfect. Let's make this round. So border radius, also 50 pixels. And let's see what we got. Okay, so that's pretty good. We have the correct size, but this currently sits above the icon, and we don't want that. So let's do the following. Let's set a z index of 0, and then we'll target, we'll say theme switcher SVG, and we'll set a z index of 1, like that. Great. Now let's also bring the active circle a little bit to the left side. For that, I'm just going to say left 0, and because it's absolutely positioned, it should sit right up to the edge of its parent. Now here's the thing. I need to move it to the right a little bit. So there's a nice bit of padding, right, to its left, and also it will be properly aligned with the icon. But I also want to be able to animate this later on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a transform on it. And I'm going to say transform, and I'm going to use translate x, and let's actually create a variable for this. We'll say switch circle POS for position. And in my case, that's 4 pixels, so 0.22 rems. Let's save that. Let's go back here and set to switch circle position, like so. Okay, so now if we take a look, this is nicely positioned. It's perfectly aligned with the icon. It has a nice padding to its left or margin, depends on how you see it. And with that, the CSS for our switcher is complete. You should also know that this is not the only way to create a two-way switcher like this. One other common method is to use the checkbox method, where you basically have this element as a checkbox in the markup, but you style it to look like this. And that involves, hiding the default box and applying some styles on top of it. But I chose to do it this way because I think it's pretty easy to understand. And it also gives us the flexibility we need later to animate this, to change its colors and all that good stuff. Also, because I used inline SVGs, it's a lot easier to change their background color later when we're switching themes. And the same goes for the logo and also these icons right here. So then a few key points to remember. Using inline SVGs allows you to easily change the SVG image when switching between light and dark modes. For a two-step switcher, you can also implement the checkbox CSS only solution. Right, so the switch is now complete. The next step is to add the dark theme to our CSS. Let's do that next. There are a few ways of adding a dark mode in CSS, and probably the first thing that comes into your mind is a class, right? You add the class of dark to whatever element or the body, and you're good to go. That works, but I have an even better solution that involves using data attributes. Let me show you. So here's what we're gonna do in this project. Notice that pretty much every single color property, either that's background color, text color, border color, that I'm using in this project is using a CSS custom property or a CSS variables. And I went ahead and defined all of the colors right here at the very top under root. So they are accessible in any part of the page. As you can see, I have a property for the page background, the text color, the muted text color, the logo fill, and so on and so forth. And each one of these tokens corresponds to a color here in the UI. So this is the logo fill, this is the primary text color, muted text, and so on and so forth. And I think that by doing this, we make it super simple for us to create a dark theme because we're going to be using data attributes like so. We'll go ahead in the markup, and where it says HTML, we're going to define a data attribute called data theme, although you can call this whatever you want, and we'll give it the value of light. Okay, so with this set, we can go in here and we can say root, and we can say data theme equals light. This means that these CSS custom properties will only be used when the HTML has the data theme attribute set to light. This also means that we need to take these out and place them separately because I want these to be accessible from everywhere, regardless of the theme that we're using. Okay, so what we need to do now is basically copy this and create one for, dark. Okay. So whenever we set the data theme to dark here in the HTML, the browser will use these custom properties instead of these. It's a very, very elegant technique. So now all that's left to do is to populate these custom properties with the correct values. And for that, we can, of course, go back to Figma and we can start grabbing colors from the Figma document. So this is the page background. So let's just paste that in. The primary text, copy from here, paste it here. Muted text is this one. We'll just copy and paste. The logo fill will be primary text. This is exactly the same as the light theme. The input background, copy it from here, paste it in. Input background hover. For this, we'll say 24, 23, 2B. Input border focus will actually be changed to 1D, 1C, 2-3. I'm not grabbing these directly from the Figma document because I don't have them written here. But if you look over the assets panel, you can actually see that I made some shades and tints of the primary colors. And this is where I'm grabbing the values. So for example, this last one that we used is from right here. Let's see what else. Input text, that's going to be primary. Input placeholder muted. So I'm basically reusing these values. Button text is actually the same as the light mode. It's the exact same color. Button text hover. This is also going to be exactly as the light theme. And then we have the switch background. Now the switch background will, in the case of the dark theme, will actually use the same color as the input background. So I'm going to say input BG. Switch circle background. We need to grab this from Figma. Like so. Now, the position here also needs to change because the active circle needs to be positioned to the right. If you remember, we're using a translate X function. So this position compared to where it's originally starting from gives us 2.88 rems. Icon sun, these are actually going to be kind of reversed now, because icon sun is going to be using muted text. As you can see here, it's kind of a muted color in the dark mode. And this one, icon moon, is going to be using this version. And then the socials are using the primary text, and the hover is also different this time. We're going to be using B1, B0, B5. Okay, cool. So now let's go back to our page. Notice nothing changed. But if I go into the HTML and I change the mode to dark and I save, now all of a sudden, this is using the new custom properties, the new variables that we defined, and it's now displaying the dark mode. How cool is that? Now, all that's left to do is make this work so that when we click it, it switches from light to dark and vice versa. And before we do that, let's take a look at a few key takeaways. A dedicated dark class can be used to create a dark theme in CSS. Alternatively, you can use data attributes on the HTML element. Using CSS custom properties, aka variables, is a very efficient and elegant way of defining a dark color palette. All right, so far we created the switcher, we styled it, we brought the dark theme to CSS by creating those custom properties. Now we just have to make the little switcher work. So let's go ahead and do that next. let's jump straight in here. And here's a quick summary of what we need to do. First, we need to listen for clicks on this theme switcher. When we click it, we run a function that's going to check if the HTML element has light or dark applied to it. Then we simply apply the opposite. It's really, really simple. So let's jump back to code, and we're going to open the app.js, which I am loading right here at the end, or right before the end of the body tag. So inside app.js, let's start by building the switch function. So we'll define a constant here, switch theme, and that's going to be a function. And let's actually trigger this function. We'll say add event listener for the theme switcher. So we'll say this document query selector, and we'll target the parent element of the theme switcher, which in our case has the ID of theme switcher. So we'll say theme switcher with the ID sign, of course, and we'll say add event listener. We'll listen for clicks, and when a click occurs, we'll run the switch theme function. Now, inside the function, here's what we do first. We get the root element, because we're going to be reusing it or referencing it in multiple places, and the data theme value, right? We're getting basically this value right here to see exactly what we have defined. And let's actually set this to light so that it's the default value. So then we'll say the following. We'll define a constant for the root element, which basically is the document and then document element. This refers to the HTML tag. And then some variables. We'll say data theme, and that's going to be the root element, get attribute, data theme, because that's what we called it. Yeah. Let's actually close that CSS. And let's also define a new variable here called new theme. And this new variable, we'll define it like this. New theme will be equal to, and we'll do an if statement. This is actually a shorthand for an if statement. We'll say data theme triple equal light. And just bear with me, I'll explain what this does in just a little bit. This basically means the following. If data theme equals to light, then new theme will be equal to dark. Else will be equal to light. So this basically ensures that whatever I have set in the data theme, we apply the opposite. If data theme is light, the new theme will be dark. If data theme is not light, right, we get to the else, the new theme will be light. Okay, and now all that's left to do is to set the new HTML attribute. For that, we say root element set attribute data theme, because that's what it's called, and we'll set it to new theme. All right, let's have a look and see how this works. Click. Nice. So as you can see, this switches the theme nicely, but we're actually missing a couple of transitions here, and we'll add those in just a little bit. But in terms of functionality, this works just beautifully, right? We click this, the data theme on the HTML element is changed, and the new values kick in, so it's all working properly. Now, let's see about the transitions, because everything on this page transitions nicely to the new theme. Yeah, the colors are changed with a transition. They don't change suddenly. But this right here, the actual switcher doesn't have that smooth transition. So we can actually fix that. If we open up the CSS yet again, we can scroll down to the theme switcher that we created, and we can simply add a transition here. And I'm going to be using the default transition variable that I've set right here. And this basically transitions the color, background color, border color, fill, and transform over 0.3 seconds with this type of easing. So let's save that and see what we got. Okay, so now the theme switcher itself, the colors and the background colors, they all switch nicely. But the active circle needs a transition as well. So let's go back here on the before, and we'll add a nice transition here as well. So transition, default transition. So now we should actually see some nice movement. Nice. And also we need to add a transition. I'm not sure if you can see it, but the color of the icons is changed a little bit too sudden. So let's actually add this transition to the SVGs as well. Okay, so that's a lot better. Okay, so the switcher now works. It does what it's supposed to do. It switches from light mode to dark mode. But we can improve on this a lot more. And the first place we can start is by saving the user preference in the browser's local storage. Because here's what happens. Let's assume that I'm browsing the website. I switched to the dark mode because that's what I prefer. But the next time I open this website, so if I refresh, it goes back to the light mode because that's the default mode that I have set in the markup. So how can we save this user preference so that the next time he visits the website, the browser will automatically switch to dark mode? Well, it's actually quite simple. We can take advantage of something called local storage, or the browser's local storage. And before you say, no, it's not the same thing as browser cookies. Now, they're pretty similar in the sense that they are both used to store data, but cookies can be read by the server, or the contents of the cookie can be read by the server, while local storage cannot be accessed by the server. They also have a size difference, I believe. What was it? Cookies, 5 kilobytes, 4 kilobytes, something like that. And local storage can hold up to 5 megabytes. So it's quite a big difference in size. And also cookies have an expiration date, while local storage is permanent. You need to purge it manually if you want to get rid of it. So for the purpose of this demo, we'll be using local storage. I think it's a lot easier to work with. So to use local storage, I opened up the inspector tools, or the developer tools here in Chrome. And if you go to application and then local storage, you'll see that we don't have anything set for this website, right? So let's go ahead and do that. And we'll go back to our JavaScript, and right here at the end, we can actually say the following. We set the new local storage item. And it's super simple to work with. You say local storage, set item, we give it a name, theme, let's say, and a value, new theme. Okay, so now if we do a quick refresh, when we click this button, you'll see that the browser's local storage now contains a new key value pair, theme, dark. And also this changes its value to light. So that's pretty cool, right? And this stays here regardless of how many times I open the website. It's stored there forever in the browser's local storage. So we have set the item in local storage. How do we retrieve it? Well, that's actually very easy to do as well. We need to go this time to the index.html, and we'll write a script right here below the title, right before we load the CSS files, because I want to do a quick check for the local storage to see if I have any items stored in there. And if I have, I want to be able to change the data theme before the CSS is loaded. So I'm going to say script, and inside we're going to say check local storage. And here we're going to say so a variable, we're going to call it local s for local storage. Local storage get item, and we called it theme. Yeah. And here I can do a simple check. If locals is dark, then I can do document element set attribute. So we're basically changing this attribute right here, and we're going to set the attribute of data theme to dark. Okay, let's save and let's go back. Right now, the theme is set to light, but if I set it to dark, next time I refresh, the script that I just wrote sets that attribute to dark. How cool is that? And of course, I can go back to light, and now the browser knows that, hey, the user prefers the light theme on this website because of what we set here in the local storage. But there is also a second factor that we need to consider, and that is the operating system theme or color mode. And of course, this works on both Windows and macOS because they both have light and dark modes. In Windows, you can go to personalization, colors, and here you can choose your mode, either light or dark. In macOS, it's very similar. You open up settings, and you'll be able to select your theme from there. But here's how we want to factor this in. We want the local storage option to have priority, right? So if I have something set in the local storage, either it's light or dark, that's the value that we're going to use. If we don't have something in the local storage, then we check the operating system and we use that value, because chances are, if the user prefers a dark color scheme on his operating system, then he might prefer a dark color scheme for the websites. So how do we do that? Well, first of all, how do we check for the operating system color scheme? That's actually really easy to do. It's a media query called prefers color scheme. So if we do a quick search here on MDN, you can see that prefers color scheme is a CSS media feature. It's a media query in the end. And this is how you use it in CSS. If or media prefers color scheme dark, then you create the dark color scheme. If it's light, you create the light color scheme. But we want to do this from JavaScript, and that's actually possible. So here's how we do it. First, let's go right here, and we'll create a new variable. We'll call it theme to set, and by default, we'll set it to local s. And then we'll do the following check. If local storage is not set, we check the OS preference. So here we do the following: if not locals, so if local s is not set, if we don't have anything set in the local storage, then we do the following: theme to set will be equal to, and this is how you check that media query in JavaScript. You say window, match media, and then you do parentheses, and you say prefers color scheme, and then the value of dark. So if that matches, then we say dark, otherwise we say light. So we test this media query with JavaScript. So if the dark mode is set on the operating system, or if this media query matches, then theme to set will be given this value. Otherwise, it will be given this value. It's actually quite simple. So then all we have to do is set the correct theme. So I'll say document element. It's exactly what we did before. Set attribute, data theme, but this time we'll set it to theme to set. So let's go ahead and save that. And let's test it. So right now I have a value set in the local storage, which is dark. Yeah. So when I refresh the page, this is set to dark. My operating system is also set to dark. And you'll see that even if I change it to light, when I refresh this page, the browser still uses the value that I defined here in local storage. But if I were to delete this value and refresh, now it's using light because I have set light as my mode in the operating system. If I set this back to dark and I refresh the page, you'll see that it's now using the dark. Why is that? Because of what we wrote here. First, we check if we have local storage. In our case, we do not. So then we check for the media query. The operating system is using the dark color scheme, so the new theme to set will be dark. And this is what the script sets. And now, of course, if I go ahead and play around with the switcher here, I do have something set in the local storage. So now, regardless of the theme that I have set on my operating system, the browser will always use whatever I have in local storage. That always takes priority. Now, you might be asking me about browser support. Well, browser support is very good for the technique that I showed you. This should work in all major browsers except Internet Explorer. And the reason for that is, of course, the media query, which, if we look at browser compatibility, is pretty good. Let's also open this in Can I Use? So as you can see, this works pretty much everywhere except, of course, for Internet Explorer. But nowadays, we don't really care about that, or at least I don't. And in terms of the other thing that could pose a problem, it's CSS custom properties, or CSS variables. That's the other thing that we're using to make this work. And as you can see, this is also highly or widely supported by all major browsers, with, of course, the exception of IE. Now, let's take a look at some final key points to remember. Data attributes can be read and set using JavaScript. To store the user's preferred color palette, use the browser's local storage. You can access the color theme of the operating system by using the prefers color scheme media query from either CSS or JavaScript. All right, and that's about it for this course. Which color theme do you prefer? Is it light or is it dark? Let us know down in the comments. Also, don't forget to check out the Envato Tuts Plus YouTube channel for more content like this and to learn about web design and web development and a whole lot more. It's all free, so make sure to also hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. I'm Adi. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time,